Hi, it's Luda here. Join me to listen, learn and reflect. In Conversation with Mothers Producers is a series of interviews with successful producers. All of them are mothers who combine their family commitment with the producing role. I would love to hear their stories about personal and professional journey and ask for advice for any emerging producers or other specialists who are planning to combine career and parenthood.
I've got one daughter and her name is Freya and she's 4 years old. So when I was working for Cheeky Little Media, who are an animation company, and I was working for them on a fixed contract. I was line producing a series called Kazoops, which was a series that we were producing for Netflix, the ABC and BBC. I suppose having worked in the industry for a number of years prior to having a child, I was very used to that sort of contract-based freelance way of working and living, where you're sort of contract to contract, and that works fine when you're used to it and when you don't have so many responsibilities. But I guess once you have a child, that becomes more challenging because you kind of need that consistency of day to day, week to week, knowing where you are and how you're going to be able to juggle your responsibilities of work and your child.
When did you come back to your position?
I was on a fixed term contract to deliver a show. And so I pretty much finished that project when I went on maternity leave. It was kind of just wrapping up, so someone took that on. So I sort of left the workforce to have my child, not knowing what my employment would look like when I was ready to go back. And then that sort of is what happened. I went back to work at when Freya was 7 months old, full time, and my partner took 6 months off and had 6 months with Freya. And then after that period of time, I again changed my working arrangement, went back to the animation company on a part-time basis, and we just sort of shared the childcare for another sort of 6 months, where we were both working part-time and we had a little bit of sort of nannies to support that. So it's all been very fluid. And I think it kind of has to be that way. I think that being a mother has been so valuable to my career development, absolutely, my personal development at work, because I understand the audience in a way that I didn't before. I didn't really have a lot of contact with other children. I mean, other than friends' children, but it's not like I had family members with young kids. So, and I happen to be working on a preschool show now, so I'm producing a preschool show for the ABC that will launch at the end of the year. And so that has been so valuable.
Do you remember the most challenging day when you had to juggle between your family commitments and your producing role?
I wouldn't say it was necessarily about juggle, but I would take the most challenging day, and I remember it vividly, was when I was working. So Freya would only be about 8 months old, and I was working on Home and Away, and it was a pretty full-on job being a post-producer on that, a high volume of projects you're turning around, like episodes you're turning around every week, 5 episodes a week, so real high volume stuff. And I just remember that one day turning up to a whole day or a whole morning review session with the composer, and I'd been up every 45 minutes, as you know, you have those nights with your kids where they're teething or whatever, and I had a lot with Freya where I was massively sleep deprived, and you think, how am I going to get through this day? So I think that was probably like a moment I remember very vividly, and I think that was the most challenging period, is going back to full-time work in a new role when she was still very young. And in terms of what you're juggling the demands of a high-pressure job with, you know, a sort of high turnaround, fast turnaround project, and then also being home, you know, getting home in time to do the parent stuff, and also was still breastfeeding throughout that period. So trying to schedule in the pumping breaks in between these very long review sessions. And that was quite a juggle, yes. I suppose in general, I feel extremely lucky. I've got a great role that is incredibly flexible. I work for a company who are very open-minded to flexible working. So I'm lucky that I don't have to make that many trade-offs. I suppose what I have realised is my particular role is not a part-time role. If I was talking ideal world, I'd probably work 4 days a week so I could have a day a week with my daughter other than the weekend. That would be nice. And I have had that at points when I was doing a slightly different role here and that was possible. So maybe that's the trade-off. I guess I feel fortunate in animation. You're running a bit of a marathon rather than a sprint. Over a long period of time, you can't push in the way that you do with live action. Because I've worked in live action as well, and when you're in pre-production for a shoot, and then during that shoot, you've got to put everything, you're into that. And that level of intensity on top of parenting, I think I would find that hard to sustain.
When you feel exhausted and tired, what motivated you? Is there something that is your inspiration?
I guess I keep going because thankfully I do a job that I really love. And so even in those moments where I'm really exhausted, I have the drive to keep going because I guess I'm quite goal orientated. I want to, tick things off my list and move on and achieve what I've set out to do. So, but ultimately it's because I really like what I'm doing. If I was doing a job that I wasn't so into, then I think it would be hard to keep going in those moments. In reflection, I guess I've been lucky in that I planted a few seeds before having my daughter, so re-entering the industry after having her was easier. That would be hard if you were setting out. Because I suppose in those more senior roles you get more flexibility because you're kind of managing yourself. From an animation perspective, there is potential for complete flexibility. We learned during the pandemic that it's possible to run productions 100% remotely, and with that remote aspect comes flexibility. Being a mother shouldn't be a hindrance, and if anything, as we discussed, working in the kids space, being a mother should be a benefit because you understand your audience. But it's probably more challenging on a shoot setting to give that flexibility that parents really need, and not just mothers but also fathers. I don't think I would change anything on reflection. It was very hard going back to full-time work. It was really tough, but it was also really rewarding to see her having that bonding time with her father, and just the job itself that I was on. I learned a huge amount in a short space of time, and it's sort of, in a way, even though it was a bit of a baptism of fire going back full-time, it sort of gave me that jolt to just get back into it and get my head around working again. Well, I guess in terms of what you bring from work to the home setting, I'm in that sort of toddler age range, or a little bit older now. You're just working through a constant set of negotiations with your child, which is pretty similar to work. Just sort of managing everybody's energies and requirements, and just negotiating that on a daily basis. So that there's definitely some mirrors there. And then in terms of what my experience as a mother brings to my workplace, I think, other than what we've already talked about, which is understanding my audience, be it working in preschool, also just I think a level of patience, and a level of just being a bit more relaxed about things.
What should I be prepared for, and what should I not maybe be afraid of?
I guess is one of the challenges, and not just being a mother and a producer, but just being a mother and a working mother, is that constant tussle and that balance between you and your partner or whoever the other caregivers are, and just in terms of who's responsible for what and how you're going to balance it all. And that I'd say is one of the greatest challenges. Something that has been very interesting for me to observe is that between my friendship group, I've got some friends who are full-time stay-at-home mums, some that full-time work, and somewhere in between. And that is, as a mother, that's something that you tussle with. Do I want to be away from my child full-time? Do I want to be around? Like, how am I going to best benefit their experience as a child and going into adulthood? And one thing that has been really interesting for me, and I've realised is really important as a woman, is that you're role modelling certain behaviours to your daughter, not just if you've got daughter's son as well. And so I'm working in our industry where the spotlight is on the challenges of not having enough female protagonists on screen or females behind the camera. I've realised that I sort of owe it to my daughter to go back to work. If I stayed at home full time and just stepped away from the industry for a number of years until she was older, then potentially I'm losing out on making a positive impact to the stories that are told. Because if we had a situation where mothers just stepped out of the workplace for a number of years while they were having children, that is going to have a very clear impact on stories that are being told. So from that perspective, as a female producer, I almost felt like I owed it to my daughter to go back to work and be that role model and tell those stories that otherwise might not be told.
And it's a great inspiration as well, and not just motivation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.